I've always been fascinated with Batman ever since I was a kid, from the early 80s and 90s Batman movies, cartoons, and games. So when there was word of another live screen adaptation of Batman, I was excited whilst maintaining an air of realistic skepticism, especially with the first initial leaks being kinda rocky and Warner Bros' track record of Batman in recent years, which left me and many others critical of this film. But as it premiered on opening night, I was stunned. I was taken off guard by the surprisingly refreshing plot and innovating characterization of the film, Robert Pattinson being the clear standout, whose show-stopping performance cemented himself as the definitive live-screen Batman. I can say that again in full confidence after 2 more rewatchable viewings in both the cinema and the comfort of my own home. The Batman simply works. It utilizes the source material effectively. It is a classic graphic novel brought to cinematic light. Justice was really brought to the character after so long. Every aspect about it simply works, being faithful to the comic books while being its own unique spin on the characters in the verse. Distinguished from previous iterations, the tropes and all, Robert Pattinson's Batman stands amongst the top of the hill, the new golden standard. Matt Reeves, the director of this movie, takes emphasis on the intriguing and unexplored world of the Gotham City setting to new heights to elevate the story and characters, using this reflective setting parallel to our own world to unmask the second year of the Batman's journey and growth as it begins to unravel the deep-seated secrets of this decrepit version of Gotham City, followed with an eerily twisted game of life and death to unmask the truth, all being connected to where it all started to where it all began. The synopsis alone piquing interest, working to figure out what comes next, a great example of why the Batman works. This is without even laying eyes on the stunning and breathtaking world shot by Australian cinematographer Greg Fraser, or to hear the beautifully memorable theme-fitting scores composed by Michael Giannachos. I'm not gonna lie, I said that wrong. We move. Each all connected just like the plot, hand in hand to make the cinematic masterpiece to a T. Engaging despite the monstrous film length due to its excellent pacing. Every scene is used to their utmost ability, all having relevance and importance, all playing a part to tell the bigger story with more intricate moments of significance being present throughout. There isn't a single scene you could take out of this entire movie without causing total mayhem to everything going on, which speaks volumes to the film's quality and the story told. This segues into the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. This iconic quote by H.P. Lovecraft perfectly encapsulates one of, if not the biggest working factor of this iteration of Batman: fear. It is a heavily emphasized component of the Batman, intertwined with every aspect of the film, incorporating many elements of horror, with the textbook definition of horror being painful and intense fear, dread, or dismay. This being immediately demonstrated by the anonymous bold title card and creepily graphic opening. This alone differentiates itself from previous Batman movies. The presence of fear is impactful and used masterfully. A great moment highlighting this being displayed in the following scene, where a chilling Batman monologue reveals himself amongst a packed crime-ridden Gotham at peak night during the most fitting and dangerous night for crime to run rampant, Halloween night. The shadows are heavily emphasized to conceal himself, yet be ever present, showing how he dictates his moniker of instilling fear into the heart of all of his enemies on the citywide scale, as he recognizes he cannot be everywhere, but is aware they don't know where he is. Gotham underground criminals thinking he's hiding in the shadows. He is the shadows, with the cocky facades and aggression fading into turning shoulders and trembling fear, backing away in fear, second-guessing acts of crime with presence and status alone, being a masterfully conveyed aspect of fear of the cinematography painting what they have come to be afraid of, the shadows being visually shown from the cold focusing shot to darkness as he finally slowly emerges. These iteration of Gotham goons are truly fearful of not his dominating appearance or physically imposing stature, but the fear of uncertainty of him being everywhere at once. Matt Reeves utilizes that single stroke of fear and paranoia of the darkness and shadows to second guess themselves, which is further accentuated with the opposite of the dark, the light. The simultaneous juxtaposing contrasting element of sudden light is shown to illustrate perpetuating fear, with an example being shown early in the film of the bright illuminating beacon visual motif of the bat signal in the completely dark sky, adding not only another method of instilling fear to the crooks, but the visual later opposing nature of darkness and light being reflective of Batman's morality and how he operates between both. Initially more so consumed with being in the dark, as it is a more prominent aspect, monologuing at the start of the film, it is a warning to them, fear is a tool, which is later paralleled in the end of the film to a beacon of hope in the second monologue: I have to become more. People need hope, to know someone's out there for them. These 2 quotes beautifully painted in progression of visuals which later on become callbacks adhering to the color contrast of light and the dark, with the depressing fearful monologue being at the start of the film and the hopeful light monologue at the climax, while Batman is looking up in broad daylight as one does for hope. So simple yet so effective, with callback shots further complementing this detail. All of this layered depth and characterization shown visually at the start of the fucking movie. Jesus. working not only showing the impossible task of being a one-man army taking on a whole city of crime in a realistic setting, but as well as the immaculate visual storytelling and characterization consistent throughout the entire film. This example being only one of many visually demonstrated moments of cinematic brilliance in this 3-hour-long masterpiece. Batman's method of tackling widespread crime, again not only visually brilliant and realistically effective, but also eerily similar to the effect of another conserved figure of justice and status in Light Yagami, where he held influence with criminals in Death Note in a similar light, with the paranoia of his presence being seemingly everywhere had criminals stumbling and taking a back seat, which I thought was a strikingly cool similarity, both being very effective at the use of fear. Fear's presence is also conveyed in graphic showings and implications, being inherently unnerving and physically cringe, being easily the darkest Batman tale even with the limited rating of PG. Couple quick examples being the sick thumb drive riddle, hearing Annika being strangled to death with her unsettling screams ripping into your ears, the Riddler's imagery of the orphanage, and crude displays of his victims such as the mayor, the DA, and the commissioner, all much more twisted than the last. Exploitation of fear is another prominent aspect in this film, all having an effect in the characters' motives, the citywide panic certain secrets may cause, fear of losing a loved one, the fear of what might happen if the truth were to be told, and what it would do to the city if the rat with wings were to find out about it, and many, many more. So much so that even the GCPD and Gotham City officials won't intervene, opting to turn a blind eye to what they're supposedly fighting against, even keeping Batman at a distance and rejecting and criticizing the vigilantism displayed from him initially, as if something bigger and more frightening than he is lurking around the corner in an unspoken yet understood silence that even Gotham's best do not want to cross. Its overall impact runs rampant throughout the entirety of the film. Even powerful figures like Batman and the Riddler and Gotham's worst are all dictated by fear. Some instances are more subtle than the more obvious moments. Batman's haunting fear of losing somebody he cares about and reliving his past being essential to his whole character. It is shown from the very beginning to the climax that this is apparent. The trigger of his fearing past is reawakened as he is confronted head-on with a young boy reminiscent of himself who had lost a parental figure and a father, looking his fear dead in the eye. Bruce coping by dawning on the call for vengeance, as well as continuing his family's legacy in his own words, drowning his vengeful delusions dictated by his own fears. His 2 years in Gotham's barely putting a dent in the crime rate as he is oblivious due to his own hubris, anger, and deep-closeted fear of loss, straying him away from the path of what the traditional Batman has to be. At first stating he never thought he'd feel fear like that again, he'd thought he'd mastered all that when at Alfred's side after a near-death experience by the hands of the Riddler, showing his flawed open side fully driven by blinding rage due to the fear of where it began. Initially hindered by his blinding vengeance, in his own words he had become a nocturnal animal, shutting away the closest people in his life with disregard shown. Consistent dialogue indicates that fact, of a highlight example being with Alfred telling him he is not his father in response to showing genuine concern, ignoring Gordon's attempt to gain his trust, and not instantly fawning over Catwoman, which is further reinforced when he gets physically close to her with the framing of the shot teasing intimacy to be swiftly followed with immediate dismissal. He even shudders away from the sunlight, indicating his underlying depression, where he isn't afraid of death or even keeping the appearance of still being away. Visually and narratively confronted with this duality and appearance of a split-faced young man in his gang induction where he does not engage with him, Bruce Wayne's only public appearance in the entire fucking movie only due to being in pursuit of the Riddler. He doesn't even attempt against his usual facade of a cocky Bruce Wayne persona that we're all used to seeing, even talking to Falcone in the same manner as if he were in costume, remaining completely silent and focused on the mission as if his true self was the costume. And in the same scene is shown metaphorically and quite literally tackling his fear head-on in the form of a little boy who lost his father, saving his life. The only other time this is shown is when his fear is tested to the max when it becomes momentary reality in the near loss of Alfred Pennyworth, where his immovable raging force is met with his fearful match. Represented beautifully in his banging anger, Silence says he could do nothing to stop it, once again put in a position of helplessness as if he were watching Crime Alley all over again. The following truth misconstrued by the Riddler where he questions his own purpose and confronts a figure of childhood fear in Carmine Falcone, a scene where he is shown in a defeated manner juxtaposed to how he conducted himself throughout the entire movie, being in a state of a frightened child once more. The dynamic is reminiscent of how Falcone described their childhood encounter even after all these years, regressing into vulnerability once more, which is foreign to what's been shown thus far. Both the antagonists of the movie unknowingly achieve in making Batman feel fear. Batman, unconsciously and blindlessly driven, tortured and afraid of his worst fears manifesting, only truly overcomes it in climactic fashion, slipping into a blind rage nearly crossing the lines of his morals, which he is shown to hold in high regard, as he was moments from losing Selina Kyle, who had now been established as someone close. The self-realization to change coming moments after being pulled back from violently laying into a previously seen character as a Riddler insurgent, uttering the phrase "he is vengeance," a line associated with himself, rocking him to the core, which he had said earlier in the movie. Opting his focus to save save the drowning Gotham being cleansed, taking the electrical shock emerging from the blue and red colored waters, which is symbolism to his initial color scheme being purely crimson red, showing his change as he rises in an almost baptized way to lend his hand to the fearful citizens of Gotham. Even a doubtful figure of the Batman in the man lends her hand. The symbolic visual motif of his fear in the child reminiscent of himself is first to lend his hand, which is a metaphor pulling himself out of the deep waters of his internal fear, and ultimately becoming hope, realizing that he needed to change, still having fear as a main weapon but no longer a hindrance it once was, addressing his initial greatest fear-fueled flaw and blind vengeance with powerful words. I'm starting to see now I have an effect here, but not the one I intended. Vengeance won't change the past, mine or anyone else's. I have to become more. People need hope to know someone's out there for them. On the other hand, the Riddler conducts himself in a less hopeful light, yet interestingly in a similar vein to this initial Batman. He even convinces himself to be working for the same goal. There is truth to this comparison. Both costume figures incorporate their ambitions on a Gotham-wide scale fueled by vengeance. Opposing figures, yet there are initially more parallels between the two, more in line of two sides of the same coin. Both are scarred individuals being heavily influenced from a young age due to traumatic events, as well as being instruments of fear to their oppositions, hiding in the shadows before they strike. Included in society on the surface level, with Bruce being the heir of the Thomas Wayne fortune and face of Wayne Enterprises having status and impact in Gotham, and Edward contributing by being an accountant, yet both masked their perceived real selves and are secluded in complete isolation and secretive bases hidden away from the world, with personal connections to their goals, orphaned with the minute distinction being upbringings, which shows what impact influence can have. They are costume figures of vigilantism, both fighting criminals just of different kinds yet the same scum, both having those crooks in a fearful state of terror and panic, both on the extreme end when dealing with justice compared to conventional methods. It's undeniable. This is further reinforced with identical shots of the two as if they are one and the same. The movie even opens up with the Riddler undergoing his greater mission of binoculars hidden and revealed in the dark shadows of scenes of Batman being shown in the exact same way shot for shot. Another visual instance of an identical paralleling shot being of a motivated Bruce Wayne when he's trying to solve the bigger picture of the mystery, from an aerial shot from the beginning to the Riddler's coup de grace on the floorboards. Paul Dano, after reviewing the initial script, researched real-life serial killers to emulate their psychotic tendencies to gain further insight to the mind of them, to add a more fearful layer and mystique to his menacing depiction of the riddled madman. It is in the likeness of the method acting Heath Ledger underwent in his preparation of the Joker to fully hammer in every aspect of their performances. Riddler's own personal fear is shown in his insecurity of being a nobody, to be forgotten, to not be seen. As he and many others' dreams were lost when the renewal fund, the hopeful light, was stolen at a young age, setting up his feud of the corruption of those running Gotham, putting up a public farce in the Waynes, especially Bruce Wayne, who he viewed was treated with too much empathy and focused on the spotlight for being orphaned unlike himself in the orphanage, where there was no coverage of their promised funds and no acknowledgement of their existence at all, while they suffered in poverty to the point of starvation and death becoming the norm, essentially forgotten. His deep-rooted insecurity to be remembered was not only obvious in his clear given inspiration to materialize a clearly premeditated plan of massive scale inspired by the Batman's 2-year notoriety and rise in popularity in Gotham, but by as well as his costume, something distinct to the eye. Think about it. He is trapped in a cruel, unforgiving city, extremely scarred from his childhood, and as menacing as he is, the Riddler looks like your forgettable everyday-looking XQC nobody Melvin, which he copes with by his costume, which again was inspired from the Batman's fame and clear attention he was getting. He not only ended up making a costume identity, but assumed it as his own identity. Even when being interrogated, he projects this onto the Batman, stating that the masked version of him is the real you. Batman did not deny this, being shown to not care about his real personal life at all up to this point in the film, obviously later changing that near the finale, but regardless, we see where the connection and assumption to their likeness have derived from, and may have even been why the Riddler orchestrated his plan of Batman's inclusion, instrumental to not only his grand plan, but the recognition it will garner, unknowingly going hand in hand and genuinely viewing Batman's attempt to solve his riddles as their twisted way of them working together, even breaking down when Batman tells him otherwise. The Riddler's fear of being invisible his whole life prompted the initial goal to unravel the truth in extreme circumstances and to bring down the corrupt. Yet funnily enough, at the heart of it all is just to be remembered and famous for what he did, showing the hypocrisy he had for Bruce and displaying his narcissism. He even pushes for his goons to adorn his attire, which he mentioned earlier he sees as his true self, even stating he had all the answers all along when being interrogated, meaning he could have easily leaked the pressing facts if he really wanted to, as well as his crime scenes being filled with over-the-top theatrics, his own logo for people to rally behind, and leaving clues when he could have remained anonymous, indicating his true goals at the end of the day was always to be seen. You showed me all it takes is fear and a little focused violence. You inspired me, says it all. Carmine Falcone on the opposite end, being an antagonist of notoriety, having clear history of Gotham in this world, world, predating the conception of both Bruce Wayne and Edward Nashton, is also shown as a massive figure of fear with pure status alone. His name, or even indirectly referring to him, has many of the characters visibly shook, with the DA preferring literal death over double-crossing him. It's to the point where even questioning his operations on the most minute details get you, let's just say, missing. He has Gotham by the balls. He's even considered to be mayor of Gotham City for the last 20 years. Accomplishing all of this with the exploitation of fear of dirty secrets of Gotham's supposed best, and of course being accompanied with the general use of violence against defiance, hustling his way into power. This is made a point of contention and is best highlighted in the reveal of Thomas Wayne's past, where having dirt on his up till now righteous character guaranteed Falcone power over him, further advancing his grab of the city. This is also the case of many of Gotham's finest and those in political power, as the truth will tear the city apart, later apparent in the film. The Penguin plays his fin in this by not only being Carmine's right-hand man, showing his prominence in the underground crime and drug scene, but shows his influence and terror of those around or whoever messes with him or the drug dealings, implementing fear of aggression and violence of his own fear of losing his position or compromising to arrest. Shown best when he's totally giddy for thinking he has bested the Batman in the iconic Batmobile scene, who is an obvious catalyst to his future ambitions of having and becoming more. The single concept and prominence of fear throughout the entire duration carries this movie to a whole new height. Its longevity is in its intricacies and perfect ties to the movie as a whole. You can really see how fear can mold a person for better or worse. Its overall inclusion here just works, showing a true deeper understanding of Batman's character, his compelling struggles, as well as his villains in his world, not only being interconnected to the psyche of Batman and how he realistically operates against a whole city, but as well as the whole ensemble, where fear is used in a variety of impactful ways to the plot, emotional journeys, music, sound design, and conveying the underlying themes and character arcs. This is something that Christopher Nolan has also implemented in the Dark Knight trilogy, but in this iteration it does not feel rehashed and adds a lot more to the story stakes and real life commentary, making this world feel very grounded and with a lot more substance. This is apparent when criminals first see Batman in this costume, mocking it, laughing at the sight of him, which is unexpectedly refreshing to see and would be very realistic in this case, seeing a costume man at night fighting crime. The shadiness of the GCPD police force and Gotham's upstanding citizen type politicians is also scarily similar to real life affairs, as well as the depiction of mental illness, which I will go more in depth about when discussing Batman and the Riddler separately. This on top of real life consequences, where Robert Pattinson's Batman, for instance, is equipped with a practical wingsuit instead of magically gliding with his cape, and maneuvers with the winds and takes legitimate repercussions and punishment from face forward rocky collision. Other examples being this iteration taking the full blunt of explosives, close range gunshots, and having his head snapped back by punches, showing a realistic side of the younger, more head forward charged Batman, where he doesn't have an aura of invincibility yet. This works for the audience with a sense of real stakes to be had, and Matt Reeves' world being vividly illustrated to us. The film being shot practically with little to no CGI aids in the establishment of feeling that this takes place in the real world and functions like it too. This more realistic spin of the character is more in tune with classic Batman solo stories, where he's confined by the rules of the world, taken to the next step, being elevated to another level by Matt Reeves' own innovative input, where Batman's intellect is on full display in this pivotal instance, showcasing Batman's full detective capability by having eye contacts that records everything he sees in his line of work, logging all of his visual recording findings down in the journal, which he can revise at any time, which is not only realistic and works so effectively in character, but is fucking genius and is something subtle that nobody could have thought of in a million years to add so much more depth to this Batman. His gadgets are also a major point of realistic focus, with clear attention to detail was shown in his arsenal of tools, which he incorporates realistically in fighting against unfavorable odds, all interestingly used in line of his comic counterpart, but not too heavy on their fantastical elements to the point he's flying over the city in a fucking spacecraft or using a military tank to blow up his combatants, but instead operating in an armored muscle car, and has further practicality in a bulletproof plated suit and knife-placed logo, which he ends up using in the climax, being a drawing factor working and pulling the audience to this version of the Batman, where he utilizes his billions to not only fund his lifestyle, but also to do so effectively when operating his vengeance. Realism being a drawing aspect of the film, especially to those not very fond of the more out there moments, and they're very much needed and neat addition to this franchise. The writing of this film is simply masterful, a clear focal strong point when discussing what works. You can really tell there was a clear unanimous vision from beginning to end when it came to the writing of this movie, being more character driven and story focused with many layers of what they wanted to achieve, where as mentioned earlier, each scene holds immense weight and purpose, indicating the script was airtight, quality being shown as each scene unravels, uplifting the overall writing and characters for the better and taking its own distinct and compelling spin on the Batman mythos. As once done by Christopher Nolan, with Heath Ledger's Joker taking a unique spin of the Mad Clown, which turned out for the better, as done again with the Riddler, Batman, and the rest of the ensemble shown. The dialogue is fitting for this more filthy and crime-driven world and feels natural and generally layered, with certain lines having more than one meaning, from the main cast to the background ensemble, and both monologues mesmerizingly told from Bruce's perspective, each line being selective what it's told, where each word uttered has relevance, narrative, and plot importance. The dialogue is also generally thought-provoking, especially with the riddles and how it ties in with the plot. You can really see the lack of stuffed input and decisions and controlling grab the studio had on the script and the film as a whole, which worked in allowing Matt Reeves to tell his story and let the writers have their creative freedom to do as they please in constructing this masterpiece. It is a leap in quality from Joss Whedon's take, but jokes aside, you can feel the clear love for the character of Batman. Matt Reeves and everyone working on the script wanted to assure they were doing as much justice as they could for the character and the story to be told, feeling like a true Batman tale, with all the noir, layered thought-provoking lines, riveting mystery, action, and the morale battle all great Batman stories have. They built a fresh yet familiar world with memorable, iconic performances and a narrative that is up there with one, if not the best Batman stories. Another reason this movie works is because in almost every scene Batman is shown, whereas other Batman movies with the title Batman has him barely in it compared to Bruce Wayne or the other characters. I think this is very effective in giving the people what they want. You can clearly tell that there is anticipation for a follow-up sequel, especially with the positive reception that specific deleted scene has garnered. Another working element is vulnerability. This iteration of Batman takes on to give one. You see him getting hit, shot, and taking the full blunt force of it all, as mentioned earlier, where the added air of realism and stakes enhances the cinematic experience. Expectations are instantly subverted for the better, taken out from the first blow he cops, with the film showing his physical limitations and vulnerability in action, as well as showing his emotional vulnerability masked under seclusion and trauma by the side of a child who lost a father, the absolute unfazed composure, broken finding out Thomas Wayne's greatest mistake in a moment of weakness as told by the distraught hospitalized Alfred, and the terror of losing somebody he cares about where he is faced with that fear head on. It's refreshing to see a flawed Batman with vulnerabilities instead of the non-invincible man of all the plans and the spot interpretation we're so used to having seen on the big screen. This version feels rough and rugged. He's not as smooth in his execution, best shown where he dives in and improvises and adapts on the spot where he doesn't have all the answers. The movie taking place in Batman's second year definitely helps with this. The writing further accentuates this factor, with many moments seeing the vulnerability of each of the main cast, both highs and lows. An overlooked moment of this film is where Bruce, being human, has a moment of physical hesitancy, leaning in for a kiss to be happy with Selina, but ultimately rejects the temptation to endure for the greater journey ahead, even looking back before heading forward to his new story at the end of the film. We even see someone as composed and as dedicated as Batman can still fall under wants and desires, but his strength's not given and his ideals are not only respectful but very admirable and in tune of his character, flawed or not. You can really feel the internal struggle our main cast undergoes, with Pattinson's Batman being the key standout. Its strength is in the consistent quality the writing gives and that extra layer of depth in this polished piece of art, adding so much to its rewatchability where you can fully intake what's going on and enjoy the deeper thematic messages and strong subtle character or dialogue moments, knowing the brilliant plot twists and turns in beforehand. This works really well in immortalizing this version of the iconic Dark Knight as a new standard of what we should have been getting all along. The stakes have honestly never felt grander whilst having a feeling of confinement, a hidden explosion in sight. Thomas Wayne's renewal fund quite literally being the driving force for the plot, even though it's mentioned so very briefly in the beginning of the film. A masterful, subtle, gone over your head moment, singular action bearing such long-term consequences within the whole plot. It genuinely feels like a race against time with the unnerving mystery, each word spoken, each action made, it all holding consequence and impact. The Riddler quite literally being a byproduct of the city's greed. The long overdue corruption backfires heavily on those who have played a part and have been paying the price for the seduction of power and money, all drowning in the destruction of Gotham City due to the massive floods caused by the said byproduct in the Riddler as well as their own lives, where they were in a perpetual state of absolute terror and panic. To take a quick moment, a quick pause in the video, can we actually talk about the fact that Riddler actually succeeded in his fucking plan? Having the truth exposed, the city in peril, and having Gotham underwater with the fishes where casualties are surely absurdly high, you cannot tell me otherwise. Watching all of this orchestrated mayhem in the safety of his cell. Although the assassination of the fleeing citizens was barely thwarted, his goals to bring literal hell and cause it to go into a frenzy did come to fruition and holds a lot for future installments, as the change caused by this event was apparent for both good and bad. If that is not totally insane showings of high stakes and permanent consequences, I don't know what is. It is honestly the equivalent if Joker had blown off both boats in the Dark Knight climax, or had Talia's bomb gone off and Rises and the movie was still to continue. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me that the villain had a big win, in the sense where he won the battle but lost the war. Still, it is most definitely refreshing to see those elements have a major presence in how it's executed. It really does take you out of the seat. But to summarize, he followed his game plan to a T and essentially won. Even though it wasn't the war, he still won. The Batman truly makes Gotham City a character of its own. It is easily the best rendition of Gotham City brought to life. It's captured so well. Every little detail shines through, with each glorious shot of the broken, wet, decrepit Victorian-like Gothic city shining through with personality. It incorporates the epic scale from the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy and the creative stylization of Tim Burton's '89 Batman, with a final splash of realism and clear inspiration from the comic books, garnished with Matt Reeves' tasteful, artistic, and clear vision for this beautiful, iconic world. The vast majority of the shots are filmed all over the world, especially in sites like Glasgow or the O2 Arena, with a blend of London, Liverpool, and Chicago all in one to build a comic-accurate looking Gotham City and more, where the effort to go to the extra mile instead of a green screen film in its entirety and practically constructing this world pays off in making it feel alive. Being shot in a variety of real-world distinct location accentuates the real-world feel this version of Gotham City clearly has, and works on resonating with people visually, automatically being connected to these real-world sites. Establishing its own take on the grim, populated, cold, and dirty DC comic city, bursting with active life and having their own new yet familiar spin on the visibly recognizable Batman sites. Examples present of course being the GCPD building, the Iceberg Lounge, and Arkham Asylum, which have a more distinct look and an apparent focus that becomes locations of importance that the audience recalls in a massive grounded world. Many of these locations are revisited throughout the movie. It truly feels as each place we visit throughout the film has history and has general visual distinctions that instantly become recognizable to the viewer when revisiting said locations, which as the settings we visit have plot relevancy, which is key to further establishing them effectively. Being gorgeous eye candy to get lost in, as cinematographer Greg Fraser really brought his A game to making this the best looking Batman film to date, and I can easily stand on that. Each shot feels like a painting. I could frame these in my room if I wanted to. It's that goddamn stunning. Illustrating and conveying so much in the engaging cinematography, Gotham City essentially is a character. It is consistently referred to as a place that isn't going to change, an opposition to the caped vigilante, with anthropomorphic terms, working and making a setting truly fitting for the Batman. The opening monologue immediately presents the dirtiest, wet, dark, and comic accurate Gotham to date, feeling very reminiscent of the Arkham games in design, with not only looking the part but playing the liveliness of the grand city as mentioned before, really showing itself as its own character within the movie, which is very rare in a typical superhero setting, which works brilliantly in adding more to an overfilled plate of things to enjoy about the working elements of the Batman. All the characters have personal interconnecting history with this Gotham, it being the focus of what needs to be saved and how it's broken and seems almost impossible to put a dent in against crime, always up for grabs no matter who's in power, adding another rich layer to thoroughly take in as the film goes on. Not only reminiscent of the Arkham games in the look, but the action too. This rageful version treats us with the brutal, satisfying fight choreography and engaging action, each combative scene feeling realistic, violent, and visually pleasing to the eye, mowing his way through the film fisticuffs, guns and all, taking on multiple thugs at once in such creative ways, incorporating his full arsenal of bat technology, and is just so damn cool to see, each instance feeling tense as fuck. The Batmobile chase scene being a peak moment of the entire movie, feeling absolutely insane each time I see it, and honestly is one of the best scenes out of any Batman film to date. They really nailed the action, I can't stress that enough. The action was that good and had me wishing there was more. One of the main reasons I wholeheartedly believe this version of Batman works is due to the innovative plot, where for the first time in any Batman movie we are taken on a noir detective journey, finally showcasing why Batman holds the moniker of the world's greatest detective, embracing that prevalent yet barely cinematic focus aspect of his character, fully utilizing it to its advantage. This is where the movie shines in building avid interest. The riveting mystery of the plot surprisingly works hand in hand in not only rewatchability, but presenting an engaging story of the sea and a series of crazed orchestrated murder cases unraveling with shocking twists, but also excels in unknowingly working with the characters, where in this case, blatant underlying hidden corruption is a ploy medium to challenge the characters' ideologies, lifestyles, emotions, and affects not only the whole cast but Gotham as a whole as well. All brilliantly intertwined in a tight confined way with satisfying and earned payoffs, from grand in your face clues to little more intricate details to background lines of dialogue, from supporting characters which become more clearer on multiple viewings, adding consistent interest throughout the runtime. It's honestly laid in every aspect, and those minute yet heavy details pay dividends in its overall quality and how it will age over time. Matt Reeves was definitely smart to take this story in this angle, effectively using the source material to his advantage with perfectly fitting characters to present a thought-provoking murder mystery with underlying themes and a deeper story told visually and narratively. So much is hidden throughout the movie to the naked eye, and it pays off in a rewarding sense of satisfaction to those who notice the more beautiful instances of the layered story, emotion, and journey of character arcs shown right there all along. There are many instances which I've touched upon in this video, with a plethora of these significant deeper visual showings being present from start to finish, with symbolism being just as prominent, using the old film saying show don't tell to the fullest extent. working and building depth of each fantastically filmed shot, instances being the young indecisive goon lit in a gang-affiliated face painting, whereas other faces completely plain, reflective of the internal back and forth of Bruce and Batman. The Batman using a flare as a visual beacon of hope as his character comes full circle, the Riddler detained in the cell yet the camera showing it as the opposite, with Batman trapped in this game of life and death, holding all the cards as if he was the one detained, the constant use of colors such as red, black and blue having character significance, Batman predominantly being in the film at night, head down of his methods flawed and unknowingly holding himself back, consumed in traumatic fear, with his arc being shown in daylight with his head up, looking up in a hopeful light as both the legitimate and symbolic knight and savior the city needed, and many more. I could do this all day. It honestly reminds me of the well-known legendary Batman story, The Killing Joke, by the infamously innovative comic book writer Alan Moore, where there is a story within a story with what is being shown, not what is being told. There are simply too many specific moments to break down individually in this video, with most of the working intrigue coming from dissection of what's being narratively weaved to the eye being revealed on your own. But it is most definitely a standout and very interesting inclusion of its prominence from start to finish, effectively smart and engaging with the audience, serving so much justice to the character and its core cast by adding another meaningful layer within its consistent visual and symbolic depth to this already strong take of the Batman of dialogue alone. We can see each aspect of the character's story, thematic values, and more in many new lights. However, when it comes to hearing the story unfold, you can really hear this world breathe in the speaker, the sound design being handled greatly and the soundtrack perfectly complementary of this world and its characters and memorability. With many moments of pure deep silence, giving this film time to breathe and hear each little sound in contrast to the loud and chaotic rumbling segments of the Iceberg Lounge Club. It's cleverly masked throughout the film and audibly orchestrated with perfectly chosen sounds where it fits, all sounding pristine and clean. I'd even argue the boots of Batman are its own character, with the overwhelming presence and awe each powerful step has in its audible focus. The popular Nirvana song Something in a Way not only perfectly capturing the vibe and character and total essence of Batman as well as the setting, but also being memorable and stuck in mind and many others' heads for days after watching the film. The placement of each score being thematically on beat, with his theme echoing throughout, really adding moments of terror and fear, mystery, intrigue, and epic scale. The sounds complement the characters' actions and what's going on in the scene effectively, where it would feel void without them, not to say there weren't any sounds in previous Batman movies, especially that one truck chase scene in The Dark Knight that is forever goated. It is more so to the point that there is much more emphasis on this aspect and makes the world feel alive and achieves in the desired effect of presenting realistic and fitting sounds made by each step, background noise, the roars of an engine, the beep of a ticking bomb, the opening of a cellar door, and the bang of adrenaline and all. Its quality and how it's placed throughout the film helps captivate the audience who may be more on the lazy side of paying attention, and is pleasing to hear for those who are fully engaged with the film, adding so much more to the movie. The characters and the standout cast are in line with what really works, especially with the amount of focus that were juggled throughout this entire story. It's pretty damn well, as we are presented with an abundance of innovating takes of classic DC figures, of some that we have seen before in the Nolanverse, such as Carmine Falcone, Alfred, Jim Gordon, and Catwoman, all making a cinematic return. Having a more broken yet involved Alfred, who has a ploy in helping Bruce throughout the movie, both in solving the riddle-based murders and as an emotionally available moral compass. Selena Kyle's Catwoman being a strong female lead, but not cringy or overly sexualized, nor being defined by, as well as having a lot more to offer in comparison of actually being utilized in duo-based situations of Batman. Effective in utilizing her strengths such as appearance to her advantage, as even Batman makes a joking remark about how many eyeballs she gets her way. Showcasing her interactions help guide our protagonist in his journey and had excellent back and forth banter. Her writing and character arc comes full circle in a satisfying emotional climax where she is contemptuous with herself and her decisions after a long internal struggle. Easily the best love interest to our jaded hero we've gotten on the big screen. I really can't believe how I've gotten this far into the video without mentioning how fucking badass this version of Jim Gordon is. He really steals the show as the hardened badass who stands his ground of the angry younger Batman and plays off him so well. He's also someone who's earned his trust and is always on site at every crime scene ready to throw down. Carmine Falcone is given so much more to do in this iteration. He is the one calling the shots of Gotham's corruption, rampant drop usage, and basically has told been the mayor for the last 20 years, invalidating the election as a whole. He's also tied to both Bruce and Selena in the plot, and to their childhood past, which is a neat addition which adds depth to our characters, especially when they interact with him. Having him beat a rat was a wonderful surprise, with his death proving the point that someone will always fill the gap of corruption, with the power struggle soon to commence in the nearby future. The Penguin also makes a cinematic reappearance in a grittier world as an excellent antagonizing force, with Colin Farrell's Penguin being such a joy each time he is on screen, in both the epic action set scenes of the movie and frightening comedy. Even having a witful instance where he catches the big brain detectives of Batman and Gordon wrong in their case when being interrogated, looking hideously terrifying yet being a wonderful comic relief where he isn't too overbearing and is placed in scenes full of tension. Paul Dano owns his performance as the Riddler, a wonderful reflective antagonist to our protagonist, with him being how upbringings and trauma can affect a person, which is also shown in Catwoman and Batman, mentioned by the Dark Knight when he says our scars can destroy us even after the physical wounds have healed, but if we survive them they can transform us, they can give us the power to endure and the strength to fight. The Riddler is realistic in his twisted ambition being somewhat understandable, even though his intentions are not truly pure, and that shows in an excellent depiction of real world mental illness and the way he carries himself very much like a real life serial killer, with his insane narcissism adding a sense of real-world recognizability, and allows a typically goofy depicted character to be taken much more seriously, even in the superhero fiction setting, costumes and all. He isn't one-dimensional, it's more than black and white, ultimately venturing into the coping mechanisms of riddles and puzzles, which he mentions using as an escape during his childhood, being another realistic feature in rough households and crippling fear of being isolated as a nobody, fueling his crazed vengeance as he deems that nobody gave him a chance, and is shown in the final scenes of the film to be preparing a comeback. His presence is captivating on screen. He has a creepy, eerie feature to him, whilst having the unassuming, frail look of Paul Dano's actual appearance, making his psychotic drop into crazy madness seem that much more creepier, showing to not judge a book by its cover, which is reflective of the plot and is a perfect antithesis to Batman, capable of outsmarting him, having his long-lasting impact on the city, and second-guessing his moral and purpose, having vengeance shook, which he did. He had vengeance shook. Speaking of Batman, he really is, as mentioned all the way from the beginning of the video, the Batman. Robert Pattinson kills it. He evokes so much emotion from just his eyes alone whilst confined in a mask throughout the entire movie. Most prominent in the Riddler interrogation scene where his emotional range is on full display, really showing how skillful of an actor Robert Pattinson really is. His inclusion being one of the best working elements of the film, if not the best. You can see clear signs of mental representation of young men in their character through traumatization, temptation, vengeance, fear, and clear signs of depression reacting to life the same way as someone who stays inside a lot. He also lets his hair go longer and has a very tired face, along with even forgetting his suit cuffs and negligence to keeping up appearances. These are realistic elements of someone who is depressed. He even says he has become acquainted with a late sleeping pattern compared to a nocturnal animal. This is also why he needs to force himself to remember in recordings and daily loggings of everything he sees when crime fighting, as he does not rejuvenate in a healthy way. These deep-rooted elements of his character becoming resonating factors with the audience with similar struggles. This is also a Batman-heavy focused film, giving him much of the needed spotlight compared to any of the other Batman films, rarely taking the camera off him, which pays in the long run in solidifying the Batman's quality. He undergoes a compelling character arc with a satisfying climax where we understand Batman's prerogative, his internal struggles and ambitions. All of those mentioned characters being genuine highlights of the film and appeal of what really works in pushing this version amongst the best. With all this working in this showing of Batman, there is more to be desired on what will work next in these future installments. An R rating will allow the darker moments of gore to prevail in elevating the grim take of the Batman-verse to greater heights, and would have done wonders for instance in this movie as well. More extensive action scenes maintaining the excellent choreography plus more action scenes in general is just an obvious, with how cool his array of weaponry, combat hand-to-hand skills and stealth are. So it's a no-brainer, especially with runtimes in the 3-hour mark where more could have been used sparingly, will definitely benefit Matt Reeves in the sequel. All in all, it's unanimous, the Batman simply works.